Pokemon X and Y were released all the way back on October 12th, 2013 on the little handheld that could, the 3DS. And I decided to play it in 2025. These games are now over a decade old and are either loved or hated relentlessly, deemed where nostalgia dies by some. For a long time, I didn't know where I stood on my views of X and Y. I remembered enjoying them, but my memory for the game was fuzzy outside a few themes, towns, and Pokemon. I played them on release, but it was more of a one-and-done experience. Instead, most of my Generation 6 memories are within the Hoenn remakes, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire. So, I grabbed my copy of Pokemon X and immersed myself yet again in the Kalos region. This was the very first mainline Pokemon game to be entirely in 3D. No more sprite models, and now moving forward with 3D models. Even if I vastly prefer the look of the sprites of old, I still really do appreciate the look of X and Y, even if some Pokemon lost in the end. Looking at you, Shiny Gengar. But the new Pokemon that do show up in these games are nice. You got Pokemon like Malamar, Hawlucha, Phantump, and pretty much the entire Dex actually. With the addition of Fairy-type Pokemon like Sylveon, the game's regional Pokedex genuinely stands out. I was scrolling through and trying to find a design I didn't fully like, but time has been kind to Kalos. Some of my favorite playthroughs on other Pokemon games have used one or two of X and Y's Pokemon, and it's for good reason. I remember dabbling with competitive Pokemon for a short time and looking up viable mons to put in a team. Slurpuff just continued to be there, and by association, this little goober is now one of my favorites. Would you help him commit a crime? On top of all the new Pokemon designs, we have some of the coolest trainer designs too. The unparalleled drip these trainers have is crazy, even all these years later. The game's evil team, Team Flare, which to many seem forgettable, have pretty flashy outfits for what it's worth, especially those glasses. These have shown up in few future games through DLC or updates. The hairstyles are outlandish, but at the same time, look at the previous teams and it starts to look normal. But wait, what if I could have my very own style and fashion sense rather than whatever the default trainer options are? Well, for the first time in the series, we get to actually customize our characters, whether it's changing your hairstyle to fully changing out of all the default clothing to something way more interesting. I vividly remember grinding money for a short time before I stopped playing X and Y to get through to just buy clothes at the fancy boutique in Lumio City. Where you gotta spend over 100,000 on a pleated skirt. Well, at least it looks nice. It seems like there's an endless amount of options to try, even if there truly isn't. I just obsess over making my character look cute in games. Can you blame me? You give me the option to stand out, and I'll do my best to try. Sword and Shield, Legends Arceus were the only other games that explored more customization past the 3DS era as a whole, and I'm glad to see that it's coming back in full swing in the future. It really helps make the experience more personalized, and it's just dearly missed with Scarlet and Violet.
Go ahead and fasten your seatbelts.
We're gonna notice just a little bit of turbulence here as we fucking got so much closer than I thought.
Along with 3D models, this game had fully 3D environments to explore. What really surprised me in my replay wasn't just how the game looked though, it was how it felt to step back into a region I almost entirely forgot. Kalos is beautiful, and why not discuss the biggest reason why? The towns and cities. While I may have forgotten trainers' names and story bits, oddly enough, some of the towns and cities really left strong impressions. Lumio City is massive, even by today's standards, with its bustling streets, cafes, and Pokemon wandering around. It feels alive in the same way Castelia City did back in Unova. I know I'm not the only one who got lost here on their first playthrough, and honestly, even this time, I still did. Exploring the buildings was a highlight for me, especially the museum. The little art pieces representing each previous region were such a nice touch, and they made the city feel connected to the larger Pokemon world. The Prism Tower dominates the skyline as the city's centerpiece, and I love that it doubles as the electric-type gym. It gives the location more significance. And of course, Lumios has its fair share of quirks, from the eerie Hex Maniac encounter to the many boutiques scattered around that I already mentioned. You can customize your Furfro here though, which is not customizing yourself, it's a Pokemon, so it's different. Overall, Lumios feels like the true heart of Kalos it was meant to be, a city that's both overwhelming and unforgettable. Lavere City is small, but it leaves a big impression. The autumn colors, the leaves drifting down around the central big tree with its wooden clock, and the soft, calming music make it feel like a place you could actually live in. I remember stumbling upon it as a kid and thinking, wow, this is really pretty. And even now, that feeling hits me all over again. There's a cozy, almost magical vibe to the town. It's quiet, but in a way that makes you want to explore every corner. And of course, the gym is tucked away within the tree with said clock, which did confuse me as a kid. It looks pretty though. Heck, the gym itself reminds me of something Sabrina would use from the Kanto games. Her and Lavere's gym leader, Valerie, would get along pretty well, I think. The Pokeball Factory is here too, and while it's one spot I wish was fleshed out way more and had more going on outside of the generic Evil Team puzzle room that we see in other games, it looks really cool, and weirdly enough blends right in despite how much it contrasts the scenery. Honestly, Lavere is one of my all-time favorite spots in Pokemon, and revisiting it gave me that same warm nostalgia I'd almost forgotten. Snowbell City has stuck with me for a long time, and walking in now, the music alone hits that sweet, nostalgic chord. Growing up in Florida, I rarely get to see snow, so even knowing the realities of cold weather, wandering through this little snowy town is just fun. The city's layout is super interesting. It's built into the mountains, so you've got these little elevation changes and multiple floors to explore, which makes it feel bigger than it really is. And at night, absolutely gorgeous. The lights and quiet streets make it feel very serene. I don't know, snowy areas are always kind of high on my list. Doesn't matter what game. The story in Pokemon X and Y, honestly, I was optimistic going into this replay, and my verdict? It's just okay. That said, there were definitely parts I loved. Let's start with the stuff that didn't sit well with me. Team Flare, for one, doesn't get a lot of time to stand out compared to prior villain groups in the series. I was hoping I misremembered that from when I was a kid, but no. Their leader, Lysander, is another weak point. You see him here and there, but I almost forgot that he was the main villain until maybe halfway through the game where his presence is known. His motivation, destroying the world out of frustration for how people act, stating that humans are filled with greed and selfishness, which isn't wrong, but to go out of the way and destroy the entire world in order to preserve the world's beauty? How do you plan to do that after erasing everything? Just please go to therapy, pal. The rivals didn't leave much of an impact either. Shauna, Trevor, and Tierno feel more like childhood friends than actual rivals, and your counterpart, Callum or Serena, doesn't really add too much either. By the time the game pushes the Mega Evolution angle onto them, it feels too little too late. They get mildly better in the post-game, but compared to rivals like Silver, May, or even Hugh, they just do not compare. On the flip side, there were a lot of parts of X and Y's story that I thoroughly enjoyed. AZ's storyline stands out as one of the most emotional in the series. A man who lost his Pokemon for 3,000 years, fired the ultimate weapon during the Pokemon War, and finally reunited with his Floette. It's heartbreaking, yet heartwarming all at once the closure's there. He didn't think that he was able to be redeemed as a person for firing that weapon, and only causing more harm than good. But his Floette returning, waiting for him after all that time, it's really special. And side note, as a kid, I found AZ really scary despite how he's just more of a gentle giant. But seeing him properly get his flowers this time around was great. Then there are the big moments. Mega Evolution, the Pokemon League, and the legendary Pokemon. These elements are what make X and Y memorable to me. The Elite Four in particular might be my favorite of any generation. Outside of Generation 5, of course. The ornate building design, the insane animations for the time, and honestly even now, gave the league a sense of purpose and just, I don't know, felt great to be in. Xerneas and Yveltal, who I thought were just okay as a kid, really grew on me. They're the embodiments of life and death, and I love how striking their designs feel even now. And then there's the post-game, which I genuinely think is fantastic. The Looker side story blew me away. On paper, it's a simple detective subplot, but the execution gave Kalos, and more importantly, Lumiose, much more heart than I expected. Even with its flaws, I still enjoy the story, the characters, and especially the post-game. X and Y might not have the nostalgia punch of older regions, but honestly, that doesn't matter. It's Pokemon. And I just wanted to be a part of the world, but I still liked being in Kalos quite a lot.
Why didn't you get your shoes?
I don't have my shoes either.
What the hell? You need your shoes to bowl.
Now, why exactly can I not wear my loafers? What is the danger?
Starting in Generation 6, Game Freak started to begin adding major gimmicks to each region. Sun and Moon had Z moves, Sword and Shield had Dynamax, turning Pokemon gigantic. But X and Y had by far one of the best without question, Mega Evolution. Mega Evolution temporarily transforms a Pokemon into a stronger, flashier form during battle. It's arguably one of the most iconic features of X and Y, giving 28 Pokemon across generations entirely new forms that instantly became fan favorites. Think Mega Charizard X, Mega Gardevoir, or Mega Lucario, the first Pokemon you actually see Mega Evolve in-game. What makes it so memorable isn't just the flashy designs, the story ties it to your bond with your Pokemon. Lucario, for instance, is given to you by the leader Karina after battling her. Even before that, the bond is hinted at through prior encounters with said Lucario, mentioning it growing fond of your battling skills, making its Mega Evolution feel more impactful when it happens. Plus, you get that Lucario as a team member, and that's pretty rad. The lore is wild too, though when we start mentioning Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, we start to dive into the multiple dimension territory. You know, because we have the original Ruby and Sapphire, and those exist in tandem with the remakes. One having Mega Evolution, and the other not. Oh god, I just want to see my Altaria get fluffier. What do you mean there are two Hoenn regions?
What you know about...
That's beside the point. That's a different game. Of course, sometimes the system flexes on realism a bit. You can catch a Ralts, train it for a few minutes, and suddenly it's Mega Evolving into Gardevoir with the right stone. And by training it, I mean throwing rare candies at it, let's be honest. But hey, by this point X and Y were throwing in Pokemon like Klefki. Which I love, by the way, don't you dare hurt their feelings. Mega Evolution made battles feel cinematic, raised the stakes, and reminded me that even my favorite Pokemon that never had a Mega form could still get one. The fan-made Mega Evolution art, the theories on who the next Mega Evolution was, it was a fun time to be a Pokemon fan. Not to date the video, but before Legends ZA releases, at this current moment, we are seeing that happen all over again. 5 megas have just got announced throughout the month, and they all have such cool marketing and trailers. It's so fun to speculate again and wish that a specific Pokemon could Mega Evolve, like Flygon. Mega Evolution has been something I always fondly remember, and even in its absence, I still love going back to the 3DS games just to see the animations all over again. It's great to see by far the best mechanic in Pokemon make its grand return.
I'm disintegrating!
So, after all X and Y has to offer, what else is there? The Friend Safari, which sadly is locked until the post-game, so I understand a lot of people may or may have not gotten to experience said zone. Unlike most games where you go to the Safari Zone, you have a unique spin here. Every 3DS friend you have that has played Pokemon X or Y can show up in your Friend Safari. You can have upwards of 3 types of Pokemon in a set zone. These can vary from common Pokemon to starters, middle evolutions, to even Spiritomb. This in itself is fantastic, but as a fellow shiny hunter, finding out that these Pokemon are found at a base 1 in 585 odds makes this area downright addictive to hunting. It's what I've spent a majority of the post-game doing, actually. The only caveat to this is it requires registering friends to your 3DS that play X and Y, but thankfully, even with the 3DS servers being down for good, you still can add others and make use of the Friend Safari. There are even ways to do this without adding people altogether, that allows this to be accessed by anyone willing to mod their Nintendo 3DS. Which is really easy to do, by the way. This was also the generation that split the shiny odds down from 1 in 8192 to 1 in 4096, but this also introduced method hunts, Friend Safari being one, but the other noteworthy method was chain fishing. You can cast your line, and with each catch, you increase your shiny odds. When at 20 reels, you are down to a measly 1 in 100 chance for a shiny to appear. The amount of videos I saw as a kid of people doing this or hunting horses via Sweet Scent was astounding. I meant to say hordes, but I'm keeping that in. X and Y truly shined a light on shiny Pokemon as a whole, and it became bigger because of it. Heck, we even got the shiny charm in Black and White too, but I would argue it made the biggest splash in X and Y. What other mechanics were there? Wonder Trade. The concept alone was so groundbreaking. Just throwing a Pokemon to trade, waiting a bit, and receiving one back at random. I really loved Wonder Trade. I never fully figured out how to use Wi-Fi on my DS, so the GTS was only kinda nostalgic, but I remember spending hours with my friends Wonder Trading and seeing if anyone got something cool. The fact it still exists in every mainline game only proves that this simple concept transformed how people enjoy, and to an extent, played Pokemon. With challenge videos like completing the Pokedex only using Wonder Trade or Wonder Locks, which transforms the Nuzlocke rules that most people know and flips it on its head by adding the fact that you can only use Pokemon obtained through Wonder Trade. It might have lost its name, but it still got the soul, with all the hackers included. This was also the first Pokemon game to be released globally for all regions across the world. This was vastly different from waiting while everyone in Japan got the latest Pokemon game very early. I remember those days. Pokemon X and Y were honestly a blast to revisit, even though the internet kind of banded together to label these games as not fun. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed them. Were they easy? Absolutely. Thanks to the XP share, it was made extremely easy to overlevel. Was the story anything groundbreaking? Not really, it was your standard Pokemon fare. But the region itself, the Pokemon designs, the customization, and the overall polish these games still have today really make them stand out to me. Back when they first came out, I was starting to fall out of love with Pokemon in my early teens. Much like how I skipped over Black and White 2, these games weren't hated by me, but they weren't fully embraced either. They were more of a quick stop along the way. But now, after spending over 100 hours on Kalos, exploring the region, shiny hunting, and just enjoying what it has to offer, I've come to appreciate it so much more. I thought this replay would just be a quick nostalgia trip, but it's turned into something far more. With Legend ZA on the horizon and Kalos back in the spotlight, revisiting Pokemon X and Y has shown me that they still hold up tremendously. They may not be my favorite region, but finishing the journey again reminded me that there's real charm here. Enough that I keep finding new reasons to dive back in. I don't know, man. Kalos is kinda cool in my opinion. And everyone should really appreciate Phantom. I mean, come on, look at this guy.